Welcome to Tier 2 of the Worst Movie Iceberg, created by Liam JB10. If you haven't already, I highly recommend you pause this video and quickly watch part 1 so you're all caught up. And also quickly make sure that you subscribe to the channel or Bert's going to be really sad and we don't want that. Alright, here we go. 1,000 Words is a 2012 comedy drama film directed by Brian Robbins and starring Eddie Murphy. The film is about a selfish literary agent, an agent for authors, who becomes magically tied to a tree in the sense that every time he says a word, the tree loses a leaf, and once all the leaves are gone, he will die. Admittedly, this is an interesting enough concept, but having a comedy in which Eddie Murphy cannot use his greatest comedic quality, being his voice, it didn't go well. And it also didn't help that the rules tied to the plot device was never explained, and it didn't matter anyway because, the supposed rules were changed when convenient. The film was nominated for 3 Razzies: Worst Picture, Worst Actor, and Worst Screenplay, but was lucky enough to not actually win any of them. Alone in the Dark is a 2005 action horror film starring Christian Slater, Tara Reid, and Stephen Dorff, and directed by Uwe Boll. It's based on the legendary video game series of the same name, and more specifically based on the events of the 2001 game The New Nightmare. The film follows a paranormal investigator as he learns about the demons and horrors of an ancient civilization. The film was criticised for its story, dialogue, special effects, and extra criticism was directed at Tara Reid for an especially stinking performance in which she was nominated for a Razzie. The critical consensus states, "Inept on almost every level, Alone in the Dark may not work as a thriller, but it's good for some head-slapping, incredulous laughter." Crossroads is a 2002 feel-good teen drama starring the one and only Britney Spears. And some other people too, I guess. Zoe Saldana, Taryn Manning, and Anson Mount. It follows the story of 3 childhood friends who rekindle their lost friendship and decide to go on a road trip, all while fulfilling their personal wants. Crossroads, although a box office success, unfortunately fell victim to just not being very good. The critical consensus states, "A cliched and silly pop star vanity project, Crossroads is strictly for Britney Spears fans only." Britney Spears won the Razzie for Worst Actress as well as Worst Original Song, and the movie was nominated for 6 other Razzies as well, including Worst Picture. Dumb and Dumber When Harry Met Lloyd is a 2003 buddy comedy film starring Derek Richardson and Eric Christian Olsen. There are so many movies that could do with a prequel, and the fact that the powers that be wished a Dumb and Dumber prequel into existence is honestly a great misuse of power. The film takes place during the high school years of Harry and Lloyd as they navigate the perils of a mean principal and other teenagers. The Rotten Tomatoes critical consensus states that this lame prequel induces more groans than laughs. Rent the original instead. Which I like because, look, I've got a soft spot for Dumb and Dumber, but presuming any amount of choice, I'm always going to go with the original. Come on. The film was nominated for 3 Razzies, including Worst Screenplay, Worst Screen Couple, and Worst Remake or Sequel. Dunyeyi Korotin Adin, I've stuffed that, sorry, or in English, The Man Who Saved the World, and popularly known as Turkish Star Wars, is a 1982 sci-fi martial arts superhero film. If you're unaware, Turkish Star Wars has received this nickname for its unauthorized use of footage, music, and sound effects from Star Wars, as well as other science fiction films. The plot follows Marut and Ali, who are stranded on a deserted planet after crashing their spaceship. A lot, but also not a lot, happens in Turkish Star Wars. It's sort of like watching a bunch of hyperactive children on a lackluster playground. However, Turkish Star Wars has blessed us with the best training montage scene probably ever. If you're not motivated to infringe on intellectual property now, you never will. The film is often considered to be one of the worst of all time, simply due to its poor overall quality, unoriginality, and incoherent storyline. But let's not worry about that. Put the training montage back on. Yes. That's the good stuff. Freddy Got Fingered got me feeling flustered, because I've got no idea how to explain this one. Written, directed and starring Tom Green, not the romantic young adult author by the way. The 2001 black comedy film Freddy Got Fingered is about an aspiring cartoonist Gordon who, after a failed movie pitch, moves back home with his abusive father who doesn't support his dreams. And he then meets a woman in a wheelchair and then a bit later claims that his father is molesting his younger brother Freddy, and then somehow Gordon and his dad end up kidnapped, I think. I'm not gonna lie, this film and its events for some reason just don't register in my brain. It's absolutely bonkers. Freddy Got Fingered has been criticised for its excessive gross-out humour, its overall immaturity, and all-round disturbing tone. The critical consensus states, unfavourably comparing it with such infamously bad titles as Battlefield Earth, a significant number of critics are calling Tom Green's extreme gross-out comedy the worst movie they've ever seen. The film won 5 out of the 8 Razzie categories that it was nominated in, including Worst Screenplay and Worst Picture. John Green did, however, accept his award in person, being the second recipient to do this in the history of the Razzies, so I respect him for taking the L on the chin with this one. Before Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez became an item in 2022, Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez became an item all the way back in the early 2000s. And where did they meet? The production of the 2003 romantic comedy crime feature, Jiggly. Maybe, I think. And although Jiggly made an impact by giving birth to an iconic couple, it didn't exactly have much in the way of an impact on anything else. Larry Jiggly is assigned by a crime boss to kidnap the brother of a prominent district attorney. A beautiful woman, known only as Ricky, is sent to stay with him to make sure he doesn't mess up the job. The critical consensus reads, bizarre and clumsily plotted, Jiggly is a mess. As for its stars, Affleck and Lopez lack chemistry. The film suffers thanks to its bad script, the surprising lack of on-screen chemistry between the lead characters, and just an overall immemorable plot. It was also one of the most expensive box office bombs in history, grossing $7.2 million against a $75.6 million budget. Although nominated for 11 Razzies and winning 7 of them, Jiggly is definitely a film to forget. Highlander 2: The Quickening is a 1991 science fiction film starring Christopher Lambert, Virginia Madsen, Michael Ironside and Sean Connery. The film is the second installment to the Highlander film series, which is about a group of immortal beings who can only be killed by being beheaded. Oh, and guess what the power that makes them immortal is called? Yeah, you guessed it. The Quickening. Although the first film was a relatively critical success, the second film dropped the bucket due to a large part of the director just losing creative control during the production. On top of its uninteresting story and horrible editing, the film is probably best known for its way too many subplots and plot holes written within them. As the critical consensus on Rotten Tomato reads, there should have only been one. What if I told you that the very first Marvel superhero movie was produced by the one and only George Lucas, who was hot off the tracks from the very first Star Wars trilogy? I mean, with that kind of prestige, surely the first Marvel movie was just as utter badass. Howard the Duck, adapted from the Marvel comic series by the same name, is about an extraterrestrial duck from the planet Duckworld, who, in a sudden turn of events, is beamed down to planet Earth. Howard must stop an alien invasion with the help of a nerdy scientist and a struggling female rock singer. The critical consensus reads, while it has its moments, Howard the Duck suffers from an uneven tone and mediocre performances. When adapted to the big screen, Howard just lost a lot of his charm. As one user on IMDB pointed out, the movie can't decide whether it wants to follow the original concept or sweeten it up to supposedly appeal to a wider audience, and it's badly confused as a result. Which I think just summarises this film perfectly. It just sits in this awkward blur in between vibe. The storyline's messy, the script's pretty bad, and Howard's just too sexy for me to deal with. I understand how Beverly feels. Howard the Duck won 4 Razzies, including Worst Picture and Worst Screenplay. In the Name of the King, A Dungeon Siege Tale is a 2007 action fantasy film directed by Uwe Boll, again, and starring Jason Statham. In this film, Jason Statham plays a farmer who goes on a quest to rescue his kidnapped wife and gets revenge on the Krugs for killing his son. The critical consensus of this film states, featuring mostly wooden performances, laughable dialogue and shoddy production values, In the Name of the King fulfills all expectations of a Uwe Boll film. If you ever wanted an example of the pure incompetency on the part of a media production company, even though The Name of the King absolutely flopped, like literally producing a $13.1 million box office on a $60 million budget, 2 more movies were made in the series. Jaws 3D, or just Jaws 3 for those who didn't get to see it in its full 3-dimensional glory, is the 3rd installment of the Jaws franchise. Released in 1983, Jaws 3D takes place at SeaWorld years after the first 2 films. A group of marine biologists attempt to capture and kill a young great white shark that makes its way into SeaWorld, and then later chaos follows when its ferocious mother breaks into the marine centre in order to avenge the death of its baby. Critical consensus reads, a cheese-soaked ocean thriller with no evident reason to exist. Jaws 3 bellows forth with its plaintive yet ultimately unheeded cry to put this franchise out of the viewer's misery. There was a revival of the 3D movie gimmick during this film's release, meaning many of the scenes in this film play into that, oh my god, it's coming right at me trope. It also means that the film was filmed in 3D, so that the video quality is considerably poorer when played outside of the cinema. Again, like many films on this iceberg, the film fell victim to its poor script, bad visuals, and campy performances. Also, one thing that really annoyed me, sharks don't actually care for their offspring, so the entire plot for this film just doesn't make sense. Oh, and who could forget that Jaws 3D also gave birth to the infamous exploding shark scene, which showcases some really terrifying and disturbing visuals. Watch at your own risk. Although it was once claimed impossible for society to come to an absolute agreement about literally anything on Earth, that claim was shaken upon the release of Jaws: The Revenge, because everyone agreed that it was just the worst Jaws film. Released in 1987, Revenge is odd because although it is a direct sequel to the first film, it just kind of ignores all that was canon from the third film. Jaws: The Revenge focuses on Ellen Brody, the wife of the police chief in the first film, who believes that a great white shark is seeking revenge on her family. Again, I mean, look, her son is actually killed by the shark in this film, and then to relax and grieve, she heads on down to the Bahamas. But this feels weird because I feel like the best thing to do would be trying to get away from the ocean if you know that a shark is stalking you and wants to kill your family, but hey, what would I know? The critical consensus reads, illogical, tension-free and filled with cut-rate special effects, Jaws: The Revenge is a sorry chapter in a once proud franchise. Another one for the 0% on Rotten Tomatoes club. Left Behind is a 2014 American apocalyptic thriller film directed by Vic Armstrong and starring Nicolas Cage, based on the 1995 novel of the same name. The film's practically just a shit version of The Leftovers, or Avengers Endgame, in which millions of people disappear from the earth and those that are left have to just deal with the chaos caused. Film critic Richard Roper wrote that the writing is horrible, the direction is clunky, and the special effects are not special. And the acting is so wooden that you could make a basketball court out of it. Everything about this film feels forced and overwrought. With all due respect, oh my god. Left Behind was nominated for 3 Razzies at the 35th Raspberry Awards for Worst Picture, Worst Screenplay, and Worst Actor for Nicolas Cage. Mac and Me is a 1988 sci-fi film directed by Stuart Raffle and follows the unlikely relationship between a young boy Eric and a mysterious alien creature, or Mac for short, who, after being beamed to Earth and escaped from the clutch holds of NASA, must find his family in hopes of getting home. Mac and me. Where do I even start? Apart from being a blatant rip-off of Spielberg's 1982 film E.T. the Extraterrestrial, Mac and Me was also criticised because it's literally a film by McDonald's. Kind of. The producer for the film, R.J. Lewis, was associated with Macca's because he'd worked on different advertising campaigns with them in the past, and he pitched this idea for the film to be some kind of cross-promotional undertaking, which in turn could be used as promotion in the restaurants, and that the profits that he made from the film could then be put back into the Ronald McDonald House. So it's essentially a 90-minute long commercial for Macca's. Mac's a really badly handled puppet, which means there's no real suspension of disbelief at all when you watch this film. And also he's really ugly, so that upsets me a lot. Also, the film's got really bad acting and a bad script. But I will say, props to the casting director for casting a disabled actor as the main character, because that's pretty cool. Piranha 3 Double D, yes, Double D as in boobs. It's a 2012 American 3D horror comedy film directed by John Goliger and is a sequel to the 2010 film Piranha 3D. The film follows a group of bloodthirsty piranhas as they make their way into a newly opened water park. Now, even though Piranha 3 Double D is majorly stinky, I would argue that 1982's Piranha 2, The Spawning, directed by your favourite aquatic explorer James Cameron, is actually more stinky, but I digress. A major selling point of Piranha 3 Double D and its predecessor is that it was specifically marketed as a 3D movie, which is an issue when the 3D effects are underwhelming and don't really add anything at all to the overall experience. Critical consensus stated that it strains to up the gore and self-awareness of its predecessor, and despite some game celebrity cameos, the result is a dispiriting echo of the 2010's horror comedy. Police Academy 4, Citizens on Patrol, is a 1987 comedy film directed by Jim Drake and is the fourth in the Police Academy franchise and continues on from the events in Police Academy 3, Back in Training. Probably the only notable thing about this film is that it's David Spade's feature film debut, so hit the ground running, I guess. The film continues the gradual decline of the Police Academy series, with each entry seemingly targeting a younger and younger audience. The critical consensus stating that utterly, completely, thoroughly, and astonishingly unfunny, Police Academy 4 Citizens on Patrol sends a once innocuous franchise plummeting to agonising new depths. The film was nominated for the Razzie for Worst Original Song, which was the song Let's Go to Heaven in My Car. Race 3 is an Indian action crime film directed by Remo D'Souza, and the film is about the relationships and loyalties of a criminal family planning its next big heist, and they're tested when some shocking revelations strike them. Even though the film is the 44th highest grossing Indian film of all time, it was panned for its script, plot, casting, music, and action sequences. Sukanya Verma of Rediff.com gave no star to the film and wrote, "Race 3 doesn't merely demand you to leave your brains behind, but guarantees you won't find them anywhere even after the ordeal is over." Smolensk is both a city in Western Russia and a Polish thriller directed by Antoni Kraus, I hope I said that right, inspired by the true events of the 2010 Polish Air Force crash. The film follows a journalist who refuses to accept the story she's been given and pursues her own investigation into the case. There isn't a whole lot of information surrounding this film that I could find, but it does have a rating of 1.2 out of 10 on IMDB, and it's got an audience rating of 10% on Rotten Tomatoes, so I think those ratings kind of speak for themselves there. The 1996 black comedy Striptease, written, co-produced and directed by Andrew Bergman and starring Demi Moore, and based on the novel of the same name, centers around an ex-FBI secretary who, after losing custody of her daughter, becomes an exotic dancer in order to afford an appeal to regain custody of her daughter. The CC reads, Striptease can't decide whether it's a lurid thriller or a sexy satire, which becomes a moot point as it proves disastrously incapable of pulling either off. To star in this film, Demi Moore was paid a measly $12.5 million US, which is around 22-ish million these days, which at the time was the most a Hollywood actress was ever paid for a single film. Although the movie did do pretty well at the box office, making, I believe, $113.3 million to the budget's $40 million at the box office, the movie did win 6 out of 7 nominations at the Razzies, including Worst Picture. Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, starring Christopher Reeve and directed by Sidney J. Furie, the film follows the Man of Steel, who takes it upon himself to destroy all nuclear weapons, as he sees that the US and the Soviet Union are sort of engaging in, a nuclear arms race. Casually. Ultimately, he hauls the nuclear weapons into the sun. However, the evil Professor Les has created Nuclear Man, a clone of Superman, and he wants to wreak havoc over the world. The site's CC reads, the Superman series bottoms out here. The action is boring, the special effects look cheaper, and none of the actors appear interested in where the plot's going. To put it simply, the film is just, it's a little bit messy, it's littered with plot points that don't really have any direction, it's got a poor script, and overall just has cheap production values. Moving on. Not to be confused with Marvel's Avengers, the 1998 satirical spy comedy action film, The Avengers, directed by Jeremiah Checknand, I've definitely butchered his name, sorry, stars Uma Thurman, Ralph Fiennes, and Sean Connery, and is based on the 1960s series of the same name. The logline: 2 British agents team up to stop mad scientist Sir August de Winter from destroying the world through the use of his weather-changing machine. The Avengers is confusing, to say the least. From its continuity, it only clocks in 89 minutes, which is half an hour shorter than the initial cut, which means, a lot was cut out of this film, and it was probably a lot that tied in various plot points, such as the fact that Uma Thurman happens to be cloned, and I believe that it's never explained how or why. And then fans have their own reasons for disliking this film as well, and one of those main ones being, of course, the lack of faithfulness to the source material, as the film breaks that will they, won't they relationship between the 2 main characters. Didn't exactly live up to its title. In fact, box office wise, it only grossed $55 million worldwide to its $60 million budget. Overall, that critical consensus states, a TV spin-off that lacks enough energy to spin. The Avengers is an ineptly written, woefully miscast disaster. Although nominated for 9 Razzies, it unfortunately only came away with 1, and that being Worst Remake or Sequel. Yikes. I don't know if it's possible to contract a viral infection through simply watching a movie, but if there's ever a movie to transmit a fungus through the screen onto your eyeballs, it's The Garbage Pail Kids. The Garbage Pail Kids movie is a 1987 adaptation of the then popular children's trading card series of the same name, produced, directed, and co-written by Rod Amateur. I've definitely butchered his name, sorry. For context, Garbage Pail Kids is a series of sticker trading cards designed to parody the Cabbage Patch Kids dolls, which were really popular at the time. The movie is about Dodger, a teenager who works as an assistant at a junk shop, who acquaints himself with the titular Garbage Pail Kids, as they attempt to help him woo a fashion designer. Critics disliked the film's rude humour, acting, puppetry, inappropriate moments, the appearance of the Garbage Pail Kids, the nonsensical plot, and the hypocritical message. The film, as we love, was also a box office bomb, earning just over $1.6 million on a $1 million budget. The film was then nominated for 3 Razzies, including Worst New Star, Worst Original Song, and Worst Visual Effects. Well, it was only a matter of time before we ran into our good friends Jason Friedberg and Aaron Seltzer. At this point, you could literally go back to the first tier of this iceberg and deplete everything that was said about Jason and Aaron's other films, but this one is a parody of the Twilight Saga. Like, these movies are literally all the same stinky stuff, but hey, for whatever reason, people just kept on watching these guys' films. This film grossed $81.4 million on a $20 million budget, which honestly makes me feel gross. To be fair, the critical consensus on Vampires Suck is at least a little bit nice to the lads this time around, stating, "Witlessly broad and utterly devoid of laughs, Vampires Suck represents a slight step forward for the Friedberg-Seltzer team." And that, my friends, is tier 2 of the bad movie iceberg. If you enjoyed what you saw, Bert and I would love it if you'd consider subscribing to the channel so that you don't miss out on the next tiers of this iceberg or any other miscellaneous content. Again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.